The email slid into my inbox at 3:17 p.m. On a Tuesday, subject line, monthly consolidated statement. Nothing about that seemed unusual. It was the same email our bank sent every month, summarizing the charges on all our household accounts. My card, Ava's card, the shared debit. I opened it absent-mindedly between two work calls, expecting to skim through the grocery bill, maybe raise an eyebrow at one of her boutique home decor splurges, and then close it. Halfway down the list, something made my scrolling finger freeze. Waterfront Harbor Boutique Hotel, $642.50. Itemized, late check-in fee, breakfast for two, spa package for two. The date was last Thursday night. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind stumbling over itself. Thursday. She told me she had a planning session at the office that was likely to run late. The way she'd said it, lightly annoyed, rolling her eyes, had seemed harmless at the time. I'd made a joke about ordering a pizza for one. She'd laughed, kissed me on the cheek, and headed out with her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. Now, sitting at my desk, the image of her that night started to rewind and replay. Her hair styled more carefully than usual, the faint trace of perfume I didn't recognize, the way she'd glanced at her phone just before leaving. I told myself there could be an explanation. There's always an explanation, at least until there isn't. But the spa package for two lodged itself in my brain like a burr. When I got home that evening, the house had that still, faintly warm air it always carried after someone had been in it most of the day. The dishwasher hummed quietly. The TV remote was on the coffee table. In the kitchen sink, two wine glasses sat at an angle, catching the dim light from the undercabinet LEDs. One of them had a faint Berg *NDY ring dried along the inside rim. They hadn't been rinsed. On autopilot, I opened the laundry closet to toss in my jacket from the day. That's when I saw it. A white robe, fresh from a single wear, crumpled in the basket. It wasn't one of ours. The fabric was heavier, the weave tighter, hotel grade. When I picked it up, the scent hit me. Not her perfume. Not mine. A distinctly masculine cologne, woody with a trace of citrus. It clung to the fabric in a way that told me it hadn't just brushed against someone in passing. It had been worn, enveloped. When Ava came in from the garage a few minutes later, she was on her phone, her voice light. "Okay, I'll send over the files after dinner." "Yep, no problem." She hung up, tossed her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door, and smiled at me. "You beat me home," she said, as if this was perfectly ordinary. "How was your day?" I didn't ease into it. "We got the consolidated statement today," I said. "The hotel charge, Harbor Boutique?" Her smile didn't falter, though her eyes blinked a fraction slower than usual. "Oh, that corporate billing error. I was booking accommodations for a visiting colleague, Mark, from the Chicago branch. He's useless with the travel portal, so I just handled it myself. It must have gone through on my card by mistake." "Breakfast for two? Spa package for two?" I asked. She laughed softly, as if humoring me. "He was there for 2 nights. Needed the room Thursday and Friday. The package was the only option left. They must have bundled it in automatically. I didn't use it. I barely even saw him except to check him in." The way she spoke, fluid, steady, with just the right dash of annoyance, was the kind of delivery that made you feel petty for asking. Before I could respond, she tilted her head slightly and said, "Anyway, how was your big call today?" The conversational steering was so smooth it was almost imperceptible. I didn't push further, not right then. But as she moved past me toward the fridge, I noticed she didn't meet my eyes again. She opened a bottle of white wine, poured herself a glass, and started talking about weekend plans. I stood there, half listening, cataloging the pieces. The hotel charge, the 2 glasses in the sink, the robe with the foreign scent. On their own, maybe nothing. Together, they felt like the edge of something I didn't want to see but couldn't stop tracing with my mind. Later that night, after she'd gone upstairs, I found myself in the laundry closet again, fingers brushing the thick cotton of that robe. I thought about taking it out, sealing it in a bag, sending it somewhere for analysis like I'd seen in crime shows. Instead, I let it drop back into the basket. The scent was still there, faint but undeniable, even with the washer door open beside it. I told myself it was just one odd charge. Just a robe. Just 2 glasses. But that was the problem with just. It's the word you cling to right before you admit you already know. After the hotel charge, I started replaying the last few months like a security tape I'd forgotten to watch. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would impress a jury. Just a run of small edits that didn't look like edits until I laid them end to end and realized the movie had changed. First came her phone. Ava used to abandon it everywhere, on the coffee table, on top of the microwave, wedged between couch cushions like a lost remote. The lock screen was a landscape photo we took in Sedona, and the passcode was a pattern only we knew. Somewhere along the way, Sedona disappeared. The phone learned a new code and started living face down, like the wood grain could keep secrets better than I could. When it chirped, she'd let it hum once, twice, 3 times, glance at me with a reassuring smile, then drift into the hallway to answer. "Work?" she'd mouth, like a magician showing me an empty hand. Calendar entries multiplied. Mornings got carved into teal gym blocks, 6:15 a.m. Repeat every other day. We still pay for that gym. The key fob in her tote has a dead battery we never replaced. Her leggings with the tiny reflective chevrons didn't leave the drawer. The teal blocks went on anyway, tidy little monuments to the idea of self-care. Placeholders for time that now felt owned by something else. Her car told its own story in numbers I couldn't argue with. The odometer jumped in ways our routine never had. She'd leave to run boring adult errands. Returns, pharmacy, a stop by the office, and come back with no bags and a passenger seat that hadn't impressed a single receipt. Sometimes the rearview mirror sat a notch lower than she likes. Sometimes the driver's seat was nudged back an inch, like someone taller had taken the wheel. I'd fix it and tell myself I was imagining it. By the next evening, the mirror would be low again, the seat a click farther than her legs require. Cars drift out of alignment. People do too. That's what I kept telling myself. Work turned foggier. Ava's building uses a badge app that logs entries and exits. She used to joke about beating the night guard to the door. Lately, I'd hear her app ping after midnight, 11:42 p.m. 12:06 a.m. Tiny digital footprints marking her out of the office long after any planning session should have ended. She'd come home with flight lag politeness, kiss me soft on the corner of the mouth, and speak in calm, well-lit summaries about resource mapping and alignment and pushback from procurement. As if the distance in her eyes had a corporate sponsorship. The kitchen started producing twins. Mornings after her team development evenings, 2 coffee cups would be drying on the mat, jazzed with the same crescent stain. 2 wine stems would wait upside down by the sink. Not 3, not 1, 2. If I asked, she'd say she'd washed one set from earlier and I must have missed it. I wanted to be the kind of man who misses things. It's kinder than being the kind who's being managed. Little luxuries appeared without a birthday to blame. A thin gold chain with a small opal that flared like a whisper when she turned her head. Minimalist studs in a velvet pouch beneath the cotton rounds. A silk scarf folded into the 3rd drawer where we keep long-retired chargers. Samples from a brand collab, she said, breezy. We don't work in brand anything. We barely know people who do. Our playlist changed shape. We share a music account, and suddenly the living room speakers were tilting toward one profile's recommendations. Mason's. He's the colleague with the easy grin and the habit of finishing stories with both hands like the air needs punctuation. The queue filled with his pet subgenres. Late-night indie that pretends it's shy. A sax loop that lands like a wink. A run of remixes he'd mentioned at a holiday mixer I barely remember. Weird algorithm, Ava said, skipping to a safe song from our wedding list. The system apologized by recommending 3 more tracks he loves. She migrated through the house differently. Ava used to wander in and perch on the arm of the couch. Phone unlocked, mouth full of half-formed thoughts about neighbors' dogs and garden centers and whatever article she just read. Lately she traveled with a small orbit. Phone, charger, tote. She never left the 3 together anywhere I might casually pass. If I asked about her day, she'd give me bright snippets. Good meetings, a colleague who wore 2 different shoes, a printer that coughed itself to death. The texture was entertaining and weirdly bloodless, like a recap of a show she liked but didn't want spoiled. New scents threaded the air that weren't ours. Not just the sharp, woody cologne that showed up on a robe and then learned the corners of the hallway, but quieter notes too. A coconut sheen in her hair that wasn't her usual, a floral lotion that lingered even after the shower steamed out the mirror. Towels carried a weight that suggested they dried someone else's steam. Once, the bathroom trash hid the folded paper triangle from a hotel soap. "I tried that fancy gym," she said. The key fob, still dead, sat 2 feet away and watched us both lie. I began tracking time the way you do after a near miss on the freeway, overly aware of distance, speed, the exact sound of tires on painted lines. I snapped photos of the whiteboard calendar before she could adjust it. I jotted start and end times for teal gym blocks. I kept receipts that used to go straight into the drawer. I told myself I wasn't trying to catch her. I was trying to understand her. That distinction mattered to me, even if it wouldn't to anyone else reading this later. Dinners grew careful. I'd suggest the new Thai place on Barlow. She'd have a late call. I'd cook anyway, because making food felt like declaring that a future still existed. 2 plates, 2 sets of chopsticks. I'd eat one plate alone while the other sat under foil, sweating a quiet apology. When she came home, she'd take 3 polite bites, call me patient, and promise to make it up to me on the weekend. Patience started to feel less like a virtue and more like a tool someone hands you to tighten your own restraints. Weekends discovered errands that could only be run by the water. The waterfront is where the city polishes itself. Boutique hotels, valets with immaculate umbrellas, boats that only rock when someone wants them to. She'd text photos, her latte, her notebook, the sun fingerprinted across the bay. No faces. Always her hand in the frame, the opal catching light like a private answer to a question I hadn't voiced. I tried to be generous. I called it stress. I called it burnout. I called it a phase we'd walk through together. I offered to go to the gym with her. She said mornings were when her rhythm made sense. I offered to pick her up after late sessions. She said the train cleared her head. I offered to pack lunches. She said I was sweet and kissed my cheek in a way that made sweetness feel like an old trick. There's a particular quiet that sets in before a storm. Not tense, not loud, just charged enough to bring the hair on your arms to attention. Our house learned that quiet. Lamps felt 2 shades brighter than necessary. Doors clicked instead of latched. We stopped bumping into each other in the hallway like we always had. Our lives grew lanes, reflective paint down the middle, engineered for courtesy and avoidance. If you demanded a single smoking G*N, I couldn't have handed you one without a shrug. Every piece could be explained. Phones change. Algorithms hiccup. Gym memberships are aspirational. Jewelry can be employee swag. Odometers turn because roads exist. People get tired, and tired people get weird. The story was plausible until I put all the plausible things in one place and realized plausibility had become its own cover. That's the thing about patterns. They tell the truth in a whisper first. Then they start clearing their throat. Then, one morning, you wake up to find the truth sitting at your kitchen table, eating toast with the crusts cut off, and you still try to pretend you invited it. I didn't have a confession. I didn't have a confrontation, not yet. What I had was the stubborn sense that a line of breadcrumbs had been sprinkled through our days, curving gently away from the life we'd promised each other. And every time I brushed one aside, another appeared, neat and deliberate, like someone else knew the route by heart. The gala invitation had been on our fridge for a month under a lemon magnet. Museum of Contemporary Art City Arts Fund Gala. Black tie, champagne, a band doing tasteful covers. Ava called it good optics. I told myself it could still be a date night with a donor wall. When we dressed, she picked the black slip with thin straps and a cut meant for motion. I retied my bow twice. She fixed it with a quick laugh. In the rideshare, she scrolled with the screen angled away, checked her lipstick in the camera, and smiled at a text I didn't see. "You look good," I said. "You too," she answered, bright and automatic. The museum glowed. The lobby was a polite forest of high tables, orchids, and silent auction clipboards. We floated through donors and staffers in black with radio earpieces. Name tags did the work of introductions. People greeted Ava like the reliable person who answers emails at 11 p.m. We took a lap through the galleries. The band warmed up in a courtyard where a temporary dance floor sat on the concrete. A neon piece in one room read one way left to right and another if your eyes skipped. I like when things reveal themselves slowly, Ava said. Me too, I said, meaning something else. At the bar, I ordered a whiskey. She took sparkling water for now. Mason appeared with a cufflink joke and a compliment about the lighting. He wore a tux like it belonged to him. He touched her elbow when he spoke, brief and confident, a nothing that had already become a something. He nodded at me. I nodded back and felt the room tilt a degree. Dinner was small plates and speeches. The executive director thanked sponsors. A former mayor praised art for saving a tired city. I clapped and counted exits. Ava's phone buzzed. She flipped it face down. When she laughed at something Mason whispered, she didn't turn to share it. Then the bandleader announced a slow dance. Lights thinned. Couples magnetized. I stood and reached for Ava. She stood, then turned to Mason. "I'll be right back," she said to me, already stepping onto the floor with him, her palm finding his shoulder like a familiar stairwell. They moved immediately, not tentative. Practiced. I stayed at the edge with my half-finished whiskey and the sensation of being outlined in chalk. People built a privacy fence out of curved glances. The standard played on. Their heads angled close. His mouth brushed her temple in a motion efficient enough to dodge notice. When the song ended, they didn't walk back to me. They drifted toward a service corridor by a staff-only sign. Ava glanced over her shoulder without looking for me, and they slipped through. I followed, not directly. I took a parallel hall lined with photos of hands, hovering over almost touches, and eased a panic bar to the terrace the corridor fed. Outside, a canopy of warm bulbs. Beyond the parapet, the city holding its breath. 20 feet away, just inside the spill of light, Mason's hands circled her waist. Her fingers hooked his lapels like she was climbing something only she could see. They weren't talking. They didn't need to. He kissed her. Not testing. Not asking. A kiss with a precedent and a plan. Her shoulders softened the way shoulders do when what's been happening elsewhere decides to happen here too. I didn't cough or announce myself. I stood still and recorded the moment. The canopy's seam, a bulb reflected in his cufflink, the 3 beats between the kiss and her exhale. I wanted the details because I understood the story would try to change later. I backed away. In the gallery, a docent adjusted a placard half an inch. "Restroom?" I asked. She pointed. I walked until my face could be a face again. At coat check, the attendant recognized Ava's clutch from the ticket. A small satin thing with a kiss lock that clicked like a throat clear. I told myself I was being helpful the way husbands are. The clasp stuck, then gave. Inside, lipstick, valet card, 2 crushed mints, and a strip of instant photos from the booth near the donor wall. For squares. First, their exaggerated surprise. Second, her head on his shoulder, eyes closed, his grin private. Third, the look people share when the room has fallen away. Fourth, their mouths meeting. A timestamp in the corner, aligned with the slow dance within breaths. I took a photo of the strip, the photo of the photos, because memory gets cross-examined until it forgets. Then I slid it back into the clutch. The attendant handed me a claim sleeve. I folded it into my jacket like a treaty I'd later swear I hadn't signed. When Ava reappeared, she arrived from the powder rooms with fresh lipstick and hair tucked behind one ear. Mason was nowhere you could point. "Cold out there," she said, as if reporting weather. "Can we head soon?" "Sure," I said, giving her the clutch. Our fingers touched like colleagues who used to date. In the rideshare, she watched our reflection move across storefronts. "You were quiet," she offered. "Long week," I said, the kind of true that misses the story. She nodded, already half asleep, or good at it. At home, she went upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen with a silence that confirmed itself. I opened my gallery and zoomed on the timestamp in the 4th square. Numbers don't lie. They just sit still while people do. I saved it to a folder named Blandly Enough to Disappear. Doubt ended there. Whatever came next belonged to the man who had seen it, not the one who hoped he hadn't. When you've seen what you've seen, there's no taking it back. You can pretend for a while, smooth the surface, smile at the right moments, but the image still sits there, heavy as wet stone. That night after the gala, I didn't try to argue with myself. I'd reached the part where arguing is just rehearsing the pain. I started moving before my mind could start the second-guessing. The house was quiet except for the creak in the third stair. I walked past our bedroom without stopping. I wasn't going to sleep there, not after watching her hands on his shoulders, her mouth on his under the canopy. The office was where I began. I slid open the top drawer, where I keep a manila envelope marked in black ink. Taxes, important. Behind the returns were the essentials, birth certificates, property deeds, car titles, the passport I hadn't used in 2 years. I laid them in a neat stack on the desk. I wasn't taking everything tonight, but I wanted to know what I could reach for quickly if I had to leave in a hurry. Next came the laptop. I powered it on, plugged in an external drive, and started a backup. I'd done this before for normal reasons, software updates, organizing photos, but this time the goal was insurance. Her work files were in a separate folder, but her personal folder had a scattering of **TS, receipts, and half-finished travel itineraries. I copied everything with timestamps intact. Not to share, not yet. Just so the truth wouldn't evaporate if she decided to start curating her story. Her phone wasn't an option. I wasn't going to try to get into it, but the home Wi-Fi told its own quiet story. Devices ping when they join, and the router log doesn't lie. I exported the last 2 months of connections, saved them to the same drive. If anyone later claimed my suspicions were baseless, I could point to the pattern. Late-night connections from unfamiliar MAC addresses, pings between 2 and 4 a.m. Downstairs, the kitchen clock ticked over to midnight. My own phone sat on the counter, face down, next to the joint account checkbook. I logged in and saw a scheduled transfer Friday morning, 9 a.m. from our joint savings to her personal checking. The note field read simply, "Rebalancing. We don't rebalance. We talk. Or at least we used to." I canceled the transfer. Then I opened a separate bank website, one she doesn't use, and created a new checking account in my name only. I moved my half of the joint savings there, not a cent more. No hidden games, no revenge withdrawals, just the portion that was mine, safe from whatever plan she thought she was about to execute. My wedding ring came off easier than I expected. I'd thought the skin would cling after all these years, but it slid right over the knuckle and sat warm in my palm for a moment before I set it on her nightstand. Not tossed, not hidden. Placed. A small declaration. I'm done wearing this for both of us. I grabbed a duffel from the hall closet. A few days' clothes, toiletries, a flashlight, and the envelope with my documents went in first. The hard drive followed. I didn't want to be the guy who slams the door and has to crawl back for toothpaste and socks. Leaving the driveway felt like letting go of a rope I'd been gripping for hours without noticing how much my hands hurt. The street lamps slid by, making a stuttering film out of the neighborhood. I kept waiting for my chest to tighten, for the panic to arrive. Didn't. What came instead was a strange, steady clarity. She'd made her choice in front of strangers, and I was making mine in the dark, alone, and fully awake. The motel was the kind you find just off the highway. 2 floors, neon vacancy sign, front desk behind a thick window. I paid cash. No paper trail back to the house. The clerk slid me a key with a plastic fob the size of a candy bar. Room 14 smelled faintly of bleach and old air conditioning. I didn't unpack. I just set the duffel on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand. I thought about calling a friend, but I didn't want to explain. Not yet. The only person I reached out to was Maggie, her sister. It wasn't about confession. Maggie has a way of dealing with trouble head-on without making it bigger. She answered on the second ring. "Everything okay?" she asked, and I could hear in her tone that she already knew the answer. "Not really," I said. "I'm not at the house tonight. Just don't tell Ava where I am. If she calls you, tell her I'm safe, but don't say more." A pause. Then, "Understood. Do you need anything? Not tonight. Just wanted one person to know I'm okay. We hung up without her pushing for details. I lay back on the bed, shoes off but clothes still on, listening to the muted hum of traffic through the wall. It's strange. When you think about leaving someone, you imagine the big feelings will be the hardest part. The grief, the rage, the second-guessing. But the real shock comes from the absence. The absence of checking the clock to see if they're late. The absence of planning the weekend around their schedule. The absence of the weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying just to keep the surface calm. I stared at the ceiling and felt the first threads of that absence pulling through me. Somewhere between the hum of the fridge in the hallway and the steady click of the old wall clock, sleep found me. I didn't dream, and when I woke just after dawn, I knew the decision had already hardened overnight. Whatever came next, conversations, paperwork, the quiet logistics of dividing a life, would happen from a place I'd already stepped into. Alone, awake, and done pretending I didn't know. 3 days after I left, when I was still sleeping in the motel and living out of a duffel, I got a knock at my door. Not Ava's knock. Hers always came in 3 soft taps, then a pause, like she was waiting to be invited. This was one quick rap after another, impatient. I opened the door to find Mason. He looked different outside of a suit. Worn leather jacket, dark hoodie underneath, hands in the pockets like he wasn't sure whether to apologize or defend himself. For a beat, I thought he might be here to posture, to play the territorial victor. But the first words out of his mouth caught me off guard. "I think you should see something," he said. I didn't invite him in. We stood in the breezeway while he handed me his phone. A string of messages filled the screen, months of them. They were from Ava to him. Not just the kind of logistical chatter you'd expect between colleagues, not even just flirting. It was calculated. She told him she was controlled at home, that she had to keep her distance in public because I was paranoid and possessive. She promised him that the divorce papers were already in motion, that she just needed time to finalize the split, and she painted herself as the trapped romantic figure, needing his patience, his understanding, while asking him to keep any physical contact off the radar until she sorted her life out. According to him, they'd only crossed the physical line once, after a fundraiser, because she'd made it sound like I was out of the picture. He swore up and down he wouldn't have touched her otherwise. I didn't know if I believed him, but I could tell by the way his hands stayed buried in his pockets that the shine had worn off whatever he thought they'd had. When he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and scrolled through the **TS he'd airdropped to me. There was a sick familiarity in her phrasing, the same verbal shortcuts she'd once used to pull me toward her in the early days, now recycled to draw someone else in. 2 hours later, my phone lit up again. This time it was an email from HR at my company. The subject line, "Request for meeting, confidential." Ava had gone to them, claimed I was unstable, erratic, harassing her contacts after our separation. She'd even attached select text messages, carefully framed to look like I was tracking her out of obsession instead of defense. If this had landed out of the blue, I might have been on the back foot. But the week before I left, when the pattern had really started to congeal, I'd beg *N quietly compiling my own record. Door logs from the smart lock, camera snaps *TS from the front porch, screensh *TS of the hotel invoice, the wine glasses, the robe, the playlist shifts, all time-stamped, all in order. I drafted a concise, professional packet, stripped of emotion, labeled and dated, just in case she tried to turn the narrative inside out. I sent it to HR before lunch. By the time they called me back that afternoon, their tone had shifted from cautious to neutral. "Thank you for providing this," was all they said before closing the matter. It wasn't just relief. It was the strange, cold satisfaction of being ready for exactly the storm you'd predicted. That night, I sat in the dark of the motel room and thought about the shape of Ava's strategy. It was bigger than Mason, bigger than the night under the canopy. She hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been arranging the exits, drawing the floor plan for how she wanted the collapse to look. Her as the misunderstood survivor, me as the unstable husband she'd had no choice but to leave. She'd almost made it believable. Almost.